Hi guys, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thanks for watching another video on ancient history. Today we're going to be doing Themistocles from ancient Greece and Camillus from ancient Rome. One thing I should have noted on one of the earlier videos, but you might not even be watching these in order, but I watch everything on YouTube in 2x speed. I think the only videos I might not watch in 2x speed would be comedy, but I think comedy is about relative timing rather than absolute timing, so yeah, watch everything in 2x speed if you can keep up with it. Yeah, so, and I guess I might talk slow, maybe that's just my own impression, but either way, I guess let's start with Themistocles. So Themistocles was born in 524 BC and he died in 539 BC. So he was alive during the time of Solon, who kind of originally brought democracy or democratic ideals to Athens. So yeah, he was born from his father was not too rich and his mother was a Thracian. So at the time, a Thracian was kind of like a minority. So they lived outside of the city walls in a sort of ghetto. But nonetheless, Themistocles was a very popular student, a very popular guy, and he managed to befriend a lot of the well-born citizens of Rome, and then he convinced them to exercise outside the city walls with him, sort of bridging the gap between the upper and lower class there. He was always extremely ambitious and was believed he would enter public life even at very young. One of his teachers said, "My boy, you will be nothing insignificant, but something great, either good or evil." This kind of resonates with one of my favorite Napoleon quotes about ambition, where it's a constant and can be used for great good or great evil. Also kind of like Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Kind of a similar theme, just different words. Maybe this one came first, so it's the most important. Well, it did come first. So anyways, so at the time that Themistocles was getting ready to enter politics, which he ultimately did at the earliest age of 30 when he gets actually elected as archon, the Athenians were under previously had a great amount of political turmoil. They had this tyrant named Pisistrates, and he left the power upon his death to his two sons. One of them was murdered, so the other son, Hippias, got extremely paranoid and became an even worse tyrant than his father. So the Spartans at that time decided to help them out and collapse the tyranny. So Spartans could almost at that time take control of Athens if they did not take drastic measures. So strangely enough, the Athenians decide that they need an extreme democracy, which kind of seems strange because you would have thought they'd need more central government to defend themselves, but either way, they established an extreme democracy, and Themistocles is a perfect fit because he's a very populous guy. He's very popular amongst the poor. He was considered one who woed the poor, and for him, every single vote counted. In fact, it could even be argued that he cared more about the poor votes than those of the wealthy. So anyways, he becomes archon at the age of 30. At that time, I don't know, it was not directly his idea, but one of the things, and it later comes to haunt him, that they abolished along with the concept of democracy is this concept of ostracism. So you obviously probably know the word ostracize is to kind of push someone out for various reasons. But ostracism in ancient Greece at the time was it required every citizen to vote on a piece of a bowl, like a piece of a bowl, a name of a person in politics that they would like to see exiled. So that was an excessive democracy. That's why even the United States is considered a republic, not a democracy, because the government has the capacity to limit, or they have some inalienable rights that the populace could not take. But in the concept of ostracism, where anyone, no matter who, could be exiled was very democratic and almost maybe too democratic, I would argue. So either way, he establishes this rival. Or actually, prior to that, he gets involved and he kind of gets his claim to fame with the first Persian War. So this guy named Darius invades Rome, and Themistocles is particularly known for establishing the navy of Athens, and he fortunately manages to fend off Darius's invasion, and ultimately results in winning the Persian War, and he becomes extremely famous. So yeah, he develops this rival, Aristides. Aristides is more popular amongst the wealthy because he's considered the just, in the sense that he doesn't just favor the poor, but he also favors the rich. So then the Second Persian War breaks out, and you're probably familiar with this if you've seen the movie 300. It involves Darius' son, Xerxes the First, who tries invading Greece. And the movie 300 really hypes up the Spartans' contribution, but it's considered that the Athenians had a greater impact in the sense that they fought the battle by sea, which was the bigger battleground. And it was Themistocles who made the great investment into the navy and ultimately managed to fend off Xerxes by sea. Eventually, Xerxes, after losing the battle Xerxes manages to capture Athens and destroy much of the city, but Themistocles was conscious of the fact of how ambitious Xerxes was, and he knew Xerxes would want to finish off the naval battle, so he convinces or tricks Xerxes to come out and try to defeat Themistocles, where Themistocles is ready and manages to destroy much of Xerxes' fleet, ultimately winning the battle. So at that time, Themistocles is extremely famous all amongst Greece at the Olympic Games, which was attended by all Greek states, including Athens and Spartans. He was more famous than all the athletes, and most people neglected all the sports and athletics and just wanted to see him and get his autograph back in the day. But eventually he gets a little bit too arrogant. The Spartans tell the Greeks that they should not fortify many of these cities because they're worried of another Persian invasion. But Themistocles decides not to and starts fortifying many cities, which eventually upsets the Spartans. Ultimately, his downfall, at least from power, occurs when he tells his nemesis, Aristides, which is strange. I don't know why he would tell his nemesis this, but he tells his nemesis that if they destroy one of these Greek naval bases, they would be able to get Athens would be able to get absolute naval dominancy. Aristides, because he's his enemy, snitches on him and tells the people that Themistocles is corrupt and wants to take over all of Greece, and he says that his idea is the most intelligent but least just idea that he has ever seen. So with this, the Spartans call, because they are angry at him for fortifying the cities, they call him for a trial amongst the Greeks, all the Greeks, but eventually he is called to trial in Athens. But he runs away to a small town in one of the small Greek states, and the king fortunately defends him, even at the risk. The Spartans threaten to kill all the people if they don't give up Themistocles, but he gives Themistocles money to run off. Kind of a testament to the fact that many of the Greeks still respected him even at this time, even when he's being forced out of the country. So eventually Themistocles runs away to Persia, which is very strange, and he ends up taking exile under the son of Xerxes, which is strange. the son of Xerxes manages to develop a great deal of respect for Themistocles and keeps him there safe and ends up causing him any harm. But eventually another war starts becoming considered between the Greeks and the Persians, and Themistocles is asked if he can help the Persians, and instead of helping them and betraying his people, he either poisons himself or drinks bull's blood and dies. And for this reason, Xerxes' son admires him even more and doesn't harm any of his friends. And yeah, that's about it. I guess the one thing that I think I missed was that Themistocles also managed, when he was first running as Archon, he managed to gain the respect of the upper class because he was the first Archon to come from a legal background. He studied law quite extensively, which is strange because in modern politics, most politicians come from legal backgrounds, whereas this time this was brand new, novel idea. And one other thing, another testament to how arrogant he was the first leader not to develop coinage, but to put his own face on the coins, which was the very arrogant thing to do, and probably one of the reasons he was eventually exiled. Eventually, though, the Romans, or the Greeks, in hindsight, learned to favor him again, and he's considered one of the most influential people in establishing democracy in Athens and the savior of the Greeks. He is considered the most instrumental man in achieving salvation of Greece from the Persians, even above the Spartans. So that's Themistocles. We'll get to him a bit more after we go into Camillus. So Camillus was from a family called the Feri. They were once at war with the Romans, but eventually, like many other Latin states, they became amalgamated into under the Roman banner, and his family ultimately ended up becoming quite powerful. So he is noteworthy in quite a few battles, and he eventually becomes elected as censor. And one of the first things he does as censor was he starts an excessive taxation strategy to sort of subsidize a lot of the deficits caused by incessant battles the Romans have been putting on. This would be kind of like balancing the budget back in the day, which is strange because he eventually proves to be a war-loving guy, but he also is conscious that the money has to come from somewhere. So I think that's kind of interesting. So there's this battle with another Latin state, and he's elected consular tribune, which is a stronger post for him. But after 10 years into the battle, they decide they need a dictator, and they appoint Camillus as dictator of the people. This gives them sweeping executive powers, by definition what a dictator is. Kind of like that they have in Canada, the War Measures Act, where in times of peril, the leader can take stronger executive power. So anyways, they ultimately end up winning the war by sneaking out of the wall, by breaching the sewage system, which wins Camillus a great amount of favor and fame. After this, he returned in a chariot with 4 white horses, which is very arrogant, just kind of like Themistocles. This was kind of an act that was reserved for kings, not for a warlord, essentially. But the people at that time still liked him. He was later elected, so at that time he had grown. He continues to conquer other Latin cities and ultimately grows Rome by 70%. And Rome becomes the most powerful state in Italy, in all of Italy. But eventually he's impeached because the Roman people believe that they're entitled to more of the spoils of war, and he decides not to redistribute the land amongst the Roman people and kind of retain the integrity of the states that they're capturing. So he's impeached, but he chooses to put himself in exile. So he leaves Rome and goes to this other small town to kind of wait until the Romans beg for him back. And ultimately they do, because the Gauls, who were kind of like, well, they were barbarians from France, modern day France, start invading many Roman states and ultimately end up capturing Rome. But when they're attacking the small city that Camillus is in, Camillus tells the people, because he's very charismatic, that if they get conquered, the Gauls will slay them all. So they must fight, and they are proactive and manage to have a sweeping victory against one of the Gaul cities, which very much impresses the Romans, and they're kind of thinking that they want him back. Fortunately for them, the Gauls get sick because they're not burying their dead, so they have a sort of epidemic, and they tell the Romans that they'll leave if they give them a bunch of gold. But the guy, his name is Brunus, cheats the Romans because he uses a rigged scale and ends up taking way more gold, and this is not good, because that's how Rome finances all their military endeavors. So Themistocles Camillus is back, and many of the Romans are complaining to Brunus for taking too much gold, and Brunus responds, "Woe to the conquered," which is basically means like, suck it up, you got beat. But Camillus responds back that not with gold, but with iron will the fatherland be regained. So they start a battle in the streets. It's too difficult, and they end up having a battle outside with Camillus in charge as essentially dictator again, and they win, and Camillus is brought to the highest status among the Romans, and they sort of regretted at that time that they got rid of him. So many of the plebeians wanted to move into other states to sort of diversify the Romans amongst their state, and Rome had been pretty much destroyed from the Gauls, but Camillus decides not to, and decides to rebuild the Rome, and he's elected dictator so that he can make this happen. And for this reason, he's considered the second Romulus, the second founder of Rome, because he retained Rome as the capital of their state, and he rejuvenated it when it was near peril and about to be destroyed. So eventually he's starting to get really old, and he tries to lead through his son Lucius, but Lucius proves to be incapable of ruling, so he ends up having to be leader again. He starts getting sick. He's elected dictator twice more as well, so he gets elected dictator 5 times in total. The last 2 times, one of them was for political reasons, political tool for the Senate to kind of suppress plebeian wishes again, and the very last time for another Gaul invasion, which they succeed again. So I guess, first I guess we'll go into contrast. Themistocles was obviously a man of the people. He was a populist, and he really cared for the poor, from that sense, he was very excessively democratic, especially with the legislation relating to ostracism. Whereas Camillus was quite the opposite. He was very, I guess, more right-wing in the sense that he was pro-taxation, and he gets elected dictator 5 times, which is as right-wing as you can possibly get. So I guess that's the main contrast, but for any other reason, they are very much similar. They were both excessively confident, excessively showy in victory and defeat. They were excellent military leaders. They both ended up protecting their states from the Persians and Gauls respectively, and from neighboring Roman cities. They pretty much retained the integrity of their cities, especially when both Athens and Rome got conquered at one point. They managed to still hold on and managed to keep the city. And if it weren't for these two people, Rome and Athens might not still be there, or still be the capitals of their respective countries. Yeah, so that's Themistocles and Camillus. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you watch the next video. Thanks so much. Bye.